I am really pleased to bring David Brown to the podcast. He is a co-founder and partner at Ascent Employment Law based in Vancouver, BC. He is somebody who has taken not a straight line career to where he is now. He's practiced in other areas. He practiced in government. He has worked in 4 different firms. And then he co-founded his firm with his 2 partners, David and Trevor, 5 years ago. And they're really strong on values. They're really strong on ensuring that they have alignment with their team and as much as possible with clients. And he tells a lot of stories about his own challenges, his own truths. And there's just so much to learn from him and take away in how to create a great firm, if ever that is your intention or your dream. I think he's a really interesting model for that. And they're seeing some success. They're growing and they're doing great work. And he's sharing back to the community. So I felt very grateful to sit and have a conversation with him. And I hope that you take away a lot of the great advice that he has to share. And it's time, I believe, well spent. So thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Lawyer Launcher Podcast. Hello, friends. I'm your host, Susan Van Dyke. If you're a law student or a new lawyer eager to launch a successful career, you're in the right place. Drawing on more than 25 years of experience, I'll demystify the business of law and help you understand just what it takes to succeed. We'll empower you, help build confidence, and reduce anxiety. Our experts will share tips and advice, and I can't wait for you to hear from them. Now, let's dive in. David, thanks for coming and chatting with us today. I'm really interested in your perspective. And from getting to know you, your perspective is that you've worked in 4 different firms, a couple of other employers, but 4 different law firms. You have, I think, now more than 15 years of experience practicing law. Mm-hmm. You're very willing to share your experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, which is the space that I'm particularly always interested in. And you have a bit of a soft spot for students. You want to be honest and tell the truth and kind of lean into those things and share where you feel like you can share something of value. And then also you co-founded, and you're now the partner of your own firm along with David and Trevor, Ascent Employment Law. So you have, and you know, obviously an entrepreneur. So you have these really interesting pieces of experience and this attitude about, you know, what you could bring to students. And I'm not leaving behind new lawyers, but my focus is mostly students. So let's start there. And let me just ask you kind of what inspired you. You're now in employment law. You've been in employment law for a while now. What inspired you to get into that area of practice? And did your own articling experience influence you ending up where you are now? Can you kind of tell us a little bit about your journey?
I did. I'm kind of happy to share a little bit of my origin story on this. So I went to law school in New Brunswick. I'm an Alberta boy, but went out east for university. And nearing the conclusion of my 3rd year of law school, I actually didn't even have an articling job set up. It was terrifying. And I know there's a lot of students that are going through that right now, where they're kind of approaching the end of their 3rd year. Maybe they didn't have a summaring experience, and they certainly don't have an articling job that's lined up. But I was quite fortunate because I had been networking and kind of lobbying members of the BC Securities Commission that they should start an articling program. And at the time, they were a little concerned by that because it's such a niche area of law, but also because it's they didn't think that they could offer kind of like a robust articling experience to a candidate. But what they ended up doing is the chief, I don't know exactly what her title is, but the legal director at the Securities Commission contacted 3 other provincial commissions. So that would have included like the Legal Aid Services Commission, the Energy and Utility Board, and then the Workers' Compensation Board. And they kind of all banded together and created this articling program. And it was announced basically like after my graduation from law school, but on the same track, like the hiring into that role would have allowed me to kind of stay on the same track as my peers that would have been doing their articles at the same time. So it was a very, very narrow window. And so, yeah, I ended up getting that job. Very fortunate. It was an incredibly unique articling experience, although I think a fair comment would be that it didn't really set me up all that well for private practice. But it was a terribly unique articling experience. And coming to the end of my fourth secondment, that was with WorkSafe NB, so basically the Workers' Compensation Board. That's when I got my first taste in labor and employment law. And unfortunately, we got to think back. This was 2009, and the world economy was not in a good state at that time, and they weren't available. Like neither of these commissions were able to offer me a job, but it really did show to me how your network is your net worth, because all of my principals in each of these commissions kind of set out to help me land a job post articling. And so as it happens, I ended up getting a number of different opportunities through the summer there. One was acting as a crown prosecutor, and I did that for a very short stint. And then I was also introduced through the Workers' Compensation Board to start work with this. I was introduced to two different labor and employment firms in New Brunswick, and I interviewed with both of them, and that's kind of how I got my start. It wasn't necessarily by design. I was in kind of a desperate state. I would have taken whatever came to me, but I was immediately drawn to doing labor and employment work. For me, it's a relationship-based practice, and that feeds really nicely into my skill set and into the humanity of the law, which I really like. You're dealing with people who are going through some kind of conflict that they don't know how to answer on their own, and they're looking for assistance, whether you're working with a small business or whether you're working with an individual. And I've really been drawn by that. It's an immense privilege, and it's incredibly gratifying to assist people who are going through that kind of disruption. Probably one of the most stressful moments in their life, going through job loss. So that's kind of how I found my way into this area.
I'm curious about whether or not you were aware at the time of how persuasive you were before you had your articles to convince them to put an articling program together where there wasn't one.
Yeah, it really does highlight for me the importance of being your own advocate. So I've always had an interest in economics and securities and things like that. And it was really I got introduced to the the legal director at the Securities Commission, and I made a point of creating a relationship with her. And to the extent that I honestly believe that in hindsight she was my advocate for creating the position, but then also for ensuring that I got the job when it was launched. It was a public job, so it was a public competition. But I honestly feel like that job was created for me through her advocacy.
And were you building that relationship with her intentionally, or was that a,
Yes, very much so. Yeah,
yeah, okay.
very
Yeah,
much so.
yeah. So I'm interested in that because I hear threads, and it's common for me to go on about how important relationship building is from the early days,
Hmm.
and how they might benefit you in the short term, but they'll most definitely benefit you over time or in the long run. So it's interesting to me that you, as a young professional, early student, you stepped into that opportunity really boldly. And on reflection, it was a really interesting move on your part. And that's a real feather in your cap. I think that's really interesting. And maybe it was a early sign, not that it was an entrepreneurial thing that you were doing, but it had an entrepreneurial spirit in what you were doing and creating something for yourself.
Yeah, fair. I think there's a couple of pieces behind this. Number one is that when you're creating meaningful relationships in business and law, in our personal lives, you never really know when those will grow, right? Like you're planting seeds, and there comes a point where if you're going into those relationships meaningfully and intentionally and sincerely, uh, and you continue to, water. There's that expression that the grass is greener where you water it. Well, if you put intent into some of these relationships, there will come a time where it's ripe to harvest, right? And
Absolutely.
I don't want that to sound exploitive or anything like that. Like you're creating something to then gain a benefit from it later, but it can serve a dual purpose. It can serve you today and as well in the future. And the second piece that I would add to that is people are afraid to ask. They're afraid to be their own advocates. And I see this even now from a different lens, right? When I'm either recruiting clients or recruiting potential lawyers, pick up the phone and say, I think you'd be a really good fit for us. And I see value alignment in us. And I look at how you present yourself online. And I just want to let you know that I think there might be a home for you with Ascent Employment Law or even with a client. Like lawyers are terrified of the cold call. In any other sales role, that's not the case. That's the lifeblood of marketing and that's the lifeblood of the industry. But lawyers are terrified by this idea that it's like unbecoming on the profession or something. That is nonsense, right? Like I have no hesitation if I see a client or a potential client that I think could benefit from our services or where I see alignment in our services to pick up the phone and say, hi, I want to introduce myself. This is what we do, and this is how I think that we're aligned. It doesn't always work, but again, you're just kind of planting these seeds, and sometimes they grow into something meaningful.
Well, you're unique in that again, David, I think, and I could slip very easily and make this whole time with you about business development easily because you're obviously wired similarly to me. What I'll say about that, though, is while you call it a cold call, you had a spirit of helpfulness in the descriptions that you gave about whether it was a lawyer that you were aligned with and would like to recruit over to the firm or a client that you really believe you have alignment with and can help.
Mm.
In both of those scenarios, it's genuine. You think you can be helpful. You're coming to those conversations with the right intention. And I think that makes it easier. It doesn't feel so cold that you've given some thought, you have intention behind what you're doing. And I really love the idea of calling people and just putting it out there and putting yourself out there. What is the worst that's going to happen? A lawyer's going to say, the timing's not right. Who are you? Why are you calling me? But there's never going to be a downside, in my view, unless you're calling, a firm that has referred you work and you're poaching their lawyers. And I don't think you're saying that. But there's only an upside. It's so flattering to get identified as somebody that you want to hire, I think. And then on the client side, they might think to themselves, heck yeah, tell me more about your firm. You can help me? Heck yeah. And you've taken an interest in me. It means you've learned a little bit about me as a business, a company. Yeah, I think that's all good. So when we think about, you took us kind of through your early articles and what that looked like and how you were kind of a young professional at that point. How do you think things have changed now for articling students, and what challenges do they have today as opposed to 15 years ago when you articled?
Yeah. Um, I could talk a lot about about law schools and about the articling programs. I'm quite critical of them actually, and the way that they're structured. What's changed today is when I was going through completing law school and going through articles, it was a challenging moment because we were in the kind of like the depths of like the Great Recession, right?
Yeah, I
The
remember.
the
Yeah.
economy was stalled at that time. There was very little public spending. There was very little private spending, for that matter, and there was a lot of trepidation in the economy. What's changed today is if this is quite anecdotal, this is only observational, but it feels like that same stress and anxiety that I was going through in kind of an economic trough, it seems to almost be like a fixture now of the for law students coming out of law school. Um, I sense it. I see these emails all the time. I got one today, of somebody that's completing a program. They don't have a job lined up, and they're just looking for a chance, right? And so I sense that it's becoming a feature more than a bug today, and I'm very concerned by that. Um, I'm also concerned, and I don't want to go off topic from what you're asking, but I'm also concerned about the readiness of how law schools and are preparing young people for real life practice in law. It's great that we've got the theory of law and that we have a fundamental understanding of law. But what I feel young people are misunderstand is the business of law and the practice of law. And so what I mean by that is it's important to look at, at least from my perspective, others may disagree. And if you're kind of going into an institutional setting, like in big law or what have you, it may be very different. But from my perspective, young lawyers have to take ownership of their own practice and their own brand, almost like as if they were an entrepreneur in some way. Now, I understand that they might not be setting up their own shop, but taking ownership of the image that they're presenting, the network that they're building for themselves, the type of practice that they want to build for themselves, and to think strategically and conscientiously about how they're going to be achieving their goals. I remember as a very young lawyer going through an exercise where I wrote a business plan for myself, a personal business plan. I think it was a first or second year lawyer. And I basically started by asking myself, where do I want to be in 1 year, 3 year, 5 years time? What do I want my practice to look like? What do I want my client makeup to look like? What do I want my income to look like? Or my work to life relationship, work to life balance. I hate that term, but how do I want
Yeah.
that to look like, right? And it would be disingenuous to say that I followed that to a T, but at least it gave me a roadmap for how I was going to be looking to develop this. And I took personal authorship over that, right? So I started writing blogs and I started doing like presentations to small businesses and I started going to chamber events and I started doing all of these things that I felt I needed to do out of necessity. Nobody was necessarily asking me to do it, but I was doing it out of necessity because I didn't want to be, at the end of the day, dependent on somebody for my own law practice. I
Let me
wanted
ask you a
to,
question there, David. I
yeah.
love this. How comfortable was it? So you're a first, second year associate. You're
Yeah.
going out to chamber events. You're stepping into rooms where you might feel like you're not worthy. I'm not saying that you weren't worthy, but you might have felt not worthy to enter those
Certainly.
rooms. You didn't know anyone. Looking around, you're feeling like the junior in the room. How comfortable was that for you?
It was terrible. It's
Yeah,
not comfortable.
I want to be
It's
honest.
not
Yeah,
comfortable. I remember
yeah.
one event in St. John, New Brunswick, where I was working to begin with. Again, nobody asked me to be there, but I showed up and I went into this place, and I don't even remember what it was, but I remember not knowing a soul there and feeling so uncomfortable. I walked around the room and left in 15 minutes,
Oh
right?
no.
But and that's so natural, right? Is that you feel like a complete fish out of water. But then when I arrived in Western Canada in Kelowna, which is where I now work, I didn't know anybody, but I came in here with a very different outlook on this. And I said, I'm going to make a point of meeting 10 people today, right? And so I'd walk around, and this is back in the day when we had business cards, and I would exchange business cards. And, it's like that kind of business networking it's a skill. And, it's like a muscle. And just like any muscle, the more you exercise it, the stronger it's going to get, and the more comfortable you're going to be in those situations. So it was incredibly uncomfortable to begin with. And I'm not going to pretend like even today that it's necessarily a comfortable process, but you're there with intention and you meet interesting people, and these people become your friends, and these friends become your clients. And I can still point, now it's been 13 years, that I still have relationships that flow from those very, rough and tumble days of business networking, right? But it also doesn't need to look like, a business after hours or chambers of commerce or board of trade types events. There's a certain stuffiness to those events, but you can create your own brand, your own image in in the measure that you want to as a young person, as a young lawyer. So it could be that you want to, have some kind of pro bono activity or volunteer based activity. Go and join some boards, right? One of our primary drivers of business is through lawyer referrals, meaning that we work with solicitors. So these would be people that do your real estate transactions, they do your business conveyances, they do your wills and estates, but they also critically hold the minute books for all kinds of small businesses. And when those small businesses have some kind of employee issue, they're going to phone their lawyer, even if that lawyer doesn't know a thing about employment law.
Mhm.
Well, we've cultivated those relationships so that when that phone happens, they just go talk to David, right? Go talk
Right.
to Ascent.
Right.
And so every practice area is going to have their own way of connecting with community, and building that community reputation, and it's going to look different for every person out there. Uh, but it's important to have intentionality in cultivating that brand and that network, that community. That's the word that I want there, is that it's a community, right? And it can be very circular and cyclical in nature, where they're supporting your business and in kind you're supporting theirs through your own referrals.
I want to circle back and really underscore a point you made earlier about it being uncomfortable at times. That as you're starting your brand new career and you're stepping into your new role and you want to be engaged and you want to make an impact, that some of the things that you might know that you need to do, whether it's board of trade events, whether it's networking, whatever it may be, that to be ready and accept a degree of discomfort. I just talked to a client about this in a boardroom just the other day, that it could be uncomfortable and that's okay. And I loved your comment, David, about it's a muscle. And once you start doing things a little bit more and on a regular basis, it will actually, not only will it get easier, you'll get better at it. So have faith, step into the discomfort, accept the discomfort, right? We're not all
Absolutely.
extroverts, or even as me, an extrovert, I walked into many rooms packed full of people. I don't know a soul. It's very intimidating. And I'm an empath, so I'm now that person. If I'm somebody who, in quotes, belongs in the room and has connections in the room and knows a lot of people in the room, I'm the person that looks out for the solo person. And I think as people who have some experience under our belts, it's important for us to look out for the solo, particularly new professionals, and bring them under our wing and introduce them to our circles, et cetera. And I won't go on too long about that, but I do feel strongly that we have a responsibility to bring people into the nest, if you will, right? To
Oh,
look
I
after
love
them,
that idea. I
bring them
really
into the
do.
nest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really do. I love that. There's kind of two follow-up pieces that I would like to say on this. One, I think we talked in a very passing way about this idea of like imposter syndrome and not belonging in the room. Like again, I've had those moments. I remember even in law school or when I was just starting as a young litigator, being in court or being in a moot or something like that. I remember one very kind of defining moment for me where I was doing a moot competition in my third year of law school, and I just felt totally outmatched. I felt like I didn't belong there. And I remember at one point I kind of took myself aside and gave myself a slap and said, "You were chosen to be here. You have every right to be here. You have the skills to be here. You just lack the confidence." And that's, you can push through this. Like you got this. And that applies whether you're a young lawyer in court or whether you are working a networking room, right? One point that I think bears being referenced is if you see a skill deficit that you want to strengthen, you have to exercise it, right? And
Go
that
get
doesn't
it.
always
Yes.
necessarily happen on your dime, right? Like when you're getting in the scope of your work. Like when I was a young litigator, I needed public speaking skills. And so I joined Toastmasters, right? And so I'm trying to find ways to get up and talk on my feet and because I recognize that this was an absolute skill set that was needed as a lawyer. So I'm doing Toastmasters. I'm doing these free employer events where I'm hosting lunch and learns and things like that, or I'm doing webinars, and I would have been, I think, a third year call at this point when I'm trying to do this. Though point behind it is that you don't always get paid for your most important learning experiences. And by taking that initiative outside of my 9 to 5 job, although it's never really a 9 to 5, but when I started taking that initiative and with intention trying to strengthen those muscles, it didn't take long until I felt very comfortable speaking off the cuff, speaking in a courtroom setting, speaking in a business networking setting, whatever the case may be, right? And this can be a an acquired skill set. It's not, you're not born with it. Nobody's born with it. It's an acquired skill set that you develop.
So I'm hearing you identified what you thought you needed, which was accurate at an early stage in your career, second, third year call. You
Mm-hmm.
went out on your own, perhaps your own expense, certainly your own time, to go and work on those skills. And I love that statement that you don't always get paid. What did you say? You don't always get paid for your learning
For your best
opportunities,
learning experience,
your
yeah.
best learning experiences. I just really want to highlight that because I think there can be, with law students, I think there can be a temptation to look for structure because in law school you have a structure. Papers are due on a certain date, your exams on a certain date. You're kind of on this path, this predefined path. You follow the path, you do okay, you're going to come out the other side. We drop these grads into a law firm and it's completely different. There's not so much of a structure. You can't anticipate everything that's coming at you. Your learning opportunities are completely different. They're somewhat random. I'm speaking generally. They're somewhat random. You're not getting feedback like you did at school. So it's completely different. So I really appreciate what you're saying about being really intentional. And I want to ask you, David, there was a story you were going to share about a difficult moment while we're talking about, struggles that we've all gone through in our careers. You had a difficult moment during your articles and how you navigated it.
My
Did it
articles,
have
oh,
something to do with an arbitration?
oh yeah, that wasn't in my articles, but it was shortly thereafter. Yes, yes. Thank you, Susan. I do remember that. So I remember, um, I would have still been, I would call myself a young lawyer, but I was being tasked with my very first labor arbitration. And this was kind of a unique setting because usually unions represent individuals when they are going before an arbitrator. But in this instance, the union had failed to adequately represent the person. And so we got a tribunal decision basically saying that he's allowed to appoint whoever he wants. And he appointed us, he appointed me. And I had never done a labor arbitration at that point. Um, and the facts of the case were quite honestly terrible, at least my facts. So, you don't always get to choose your facts, and that wasn't a good one. And here I was, I would have been like maybe a 4 year call, and opposite me is a KC lawyer with probably 33 years experience from, a downtown labor and employment law firm. And as an arbitrator, we had, Vince Reddy, and Vince Reddy is this, for those who don't know him, is kind of like this fabled arbitrator who gets brought in when the province of BC, is about to go on strike with their teachers or something like that, and in comes Vince Reddy and he saves the day. So he's this highly, highly regarded arbitrator and decision maker in kind of the private sphere. And again, talking about feeling outmatched and feeling like a complete imposter here. Um, I remember going into that setting thinking to myself, like, all right, so I don't got the facts. I don't think my facts are going to be able to win this. My client uh, is all by himself. We've got there's going to be 8 witnesses on the other side and only my client on this side. So credibility is going to be an obvious issue here. And I just said to myself, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. I'm terrified by this process. And again, I kind of give myself a slap in the face and I said, you know what, this person engaged you. He chose you and you owe him to give him everything that you can. Right. And I said, so I'm going to do that. I'm not going to be afraid to object. I'm not going to be afraid to make mistakes. I'm going to give him the best advocacy that I possibly can. And not only that, but I'm going to, how fortunate am I that my first hearing, I'm across the table from this incredibly experienced opposing counsel. And, my bench is this incredibly experienced and respected arbitrator. How fortunate am I, right? And I said, they're not going to know it, but I'm going to make these two my mentors and I'm going to learn from them. I lost that case. It ended up being a 20-day hearing.
Boy,
20
oh
day
my
hearing.
gosh.
It was grueling. It was grueling. And I was exhausted. And but I can say with confidence that I did everything I possibly could to defend that person's interests. And even though I ended up losing it, by the same token, it ended up being one of the most fruitful learning experiences that I ever had. And if I would have told myself, I'm not suitable for this, I can't do this, I would have deprived myself of that opportunity. And I am confident that it would have set my career back immeasurably. I've never had another hearing like that, another 20-day hearing. Like those things come across your desk, like, for employment lawyers, a couple of times in a career. And if I would have said no to that opportunity, I never would have had, the kind of experience in presenting evidence, in direct examination, and cross-examination, and in objections, and presenting, appropriate objections, and dealing with complicated evidentiary issues and so on. It really did force me to kind of lean in uh, and really challenge myself. So I guess the message in this story is when you've got that voice questioning you and saying, you don't belong here, I want to say that, recognize that you do. It's not by chance that you've made it through, 8 years of school and an articling program. You belong in that room, and promise yourself that what you lack in experience, you're going to make up in energy and in effort, and you are going to take every opportunity and appoint informal mentors from all of the people around you to make yourself better, because the next time you're being asked to advocate, you'll be better, you'll be stronger in that role.
And I'm hearing you again leaning into discomfort, David. This is becoming a theme of our conversation, it seems,
It's
that
the
you
nature
just
of
don't,
law.
you don't
It
shy
really
away.
is.
Well, you
Like
didn't
the
shy away from it.
working in law, especially in litigation, you work in conflict constantly, right? And uh, and again, it's a learned muscle. I can't say that the first time that I'm picking up a phone to try to persuade somebody to pay me more money, that's an easy phone call, but it gets easier with time. It's These are learned behaviors and they get stronger over time, but the discomfort is very real in this profession. And I think that with all the issues of stress and anxiety and depression and other ailments that afflict this industry, taking that viewpoint that errors are our best teachers, um, it's really liberating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I love that you've expressed that. And I know that you and the firm and your partners are very values driven at Ascent Employment Law. That's your North Star, and it
It
seems to
is.
ground everything that you do. Can you talk a little bit about how you've come to that, how you practice that, a little bit about the firm? I think you guys are special. I mean, I've worked with a lot of dozens and dozens of firms. You guys are special in that space. Not to say you're the only ones that are values driven, but the way in which you've framed your firm, you're remote. I think you're 90% remote. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about Ascent. I thank you for that opportunity. I do think that we've created something really unique here. We did break the mold when we created this firm. So in 2020, me and my two partners, Richard and Trevor, we founded Ascent Employment Law. And uh, we, we had been, I guess, leaders in our own right, but we had never really been the drivers of law firms before. And when we stepped out and created this on our own, we knew what we wanted. And that was basically is that we wanted to create a firm that mirrored our personal values and that would attract clients that would respond well to those personal values, right? And so that was really one of the starting points of our firm was to create our mission, which is very simple. Our mission is to empower. We want to empower, of course, our clients, but also our colleagues and anybody that engages with us, like the community that engages with us. So I've talked previously about the community, right? Well, this idea of empowering our community, which can include like opposing counsel. If somebody wants to see me as an example for their own development and membership, I view that as an empowering message and I want to embrace that, right? I want to lean into that, kind of like what I had done with others, right? So that's our mission. But then we achieve our mission through the application of our values. And we use the acronym CHIRP, which is courage. We've talked a lot about courage already.
Hmm.
Humanity or humanity and care is actually the full branding of it. Honesty, integrity, respect, and professionalism. What I think's quite unique about Ascent is a lot of corporations have a mission statement and value statement. But if you were to ask, the receptionist, what is your company's values? They might be challenged to give you that answer.
They might be quickly
And
looking up the website to read it from the
yeah,
website.
exactly, right? So we were quite alive to that. And what we did to try to kind of imprint this on our company's culture is it's really simple. And sometimes like the simplest actions can have the most profound results, right? Is we bring it up. We have an all hands meeting every Tuesday, and we start our meeting by talking about our values and our mission, and then asking the team, where have we seen chirp in action? Where have we seen
Mm.
it? And it's an opportunity to call on your colleagues, but it does not limit it to that. You could talk about, I remember we've had all hands meetings, we're talking about courage and someone's bringing up, Volodymyr Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine, or we're talking about humanity and someone's talking about this nonprofit protecting women's rights in the United Kingdom or in Afghanistan or something like that. And we use it to anchor our values, but also to inspire our team, right? And to celebrate our team when obviously the values are about ourselves. Um, and what I think is unique is that, we're now 23 strong in Ascent Employment Law. And if you were to go up to any member of our team and say, what's Ascent's mission and values, even the people that have only been us for 3 months, I bet they could tell you exactly what our
Mhm.
mission and values are and how it's impacted uh, their their ability or their work. So I think that's quite novel. I think that's really special, and it might sound kind of hokey and kind of tacky to some people, but it's believed sincerely and acted on intentionally.
And I presume that you're attracting clients who, by and large, hold similar values. Maybe not exactly the same, but you're attracting the same kinds
Yeah,
of like minded people, right?
I absolutely think so. And if nothing else, I'm going to practice in a way that aligns with my values. And if the instructions that I'm getting don't align with those, I'll let the client know. And it doesn't happen often, but I've had moments where I said, I just don't think this is the right fit.
That's good for
You
your
know?
soul, David, right? If it's not
Yeah,
aligning with your
you've
values.
had to do that. Like
Yeah.
I remember a case where I'm heading into trial and my client is instructing me to, basically, humiliate this witness, bring up her sexual history, bring up this, talk about this, ask her about this. And I'm like, this has got like no relevance to our case, and this doesn't align with who I am and how I practice law. And I ended up firing that client, 3 weeks out from trial because there was this incompatibility in how we saw the law being practiced.
Absolutely. I so respect that. And I think that's so important for anyone if they're in a position to do that, to be clear on their own values. I want to change gears here for a second. I want to just talk about, I can imagine, I have a question in mind here, but I can imagine students are screaming at the podcast right now. Ask them if they take articling students or summer students. I don't know the answer to that. Do you take students?
It's
Am I
a
putting
good
you on the spot?
question. I'll be honest. We have had an articling student in the past, and we have had juniors in the past, and we don't target articling students and very young lawyers. And the reason being is I'm personally concerned because we work in a completely remote environment, and I'm very concerned about um, providing proper mentorship and career growth when you have to schedule calls with your mentor and you don't have that organic walk by
Yes,
the office and,
yes,
hey, can I
yes.
bore you for 3 minutes kind of thing.
I would share that concern. I would absolutely
Yeah.
share that
So
concern. Hmm.
it's not to say that we're not alive to articling students or that we won't ever have one in the future. But it's not a part of our recruitment plan right now.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. But if a student's listening to this now, they end up taking an interest in labor and employment law and a few years into their career, and they see a posting, hiring posting from you guys, they might recall this conversation and take an interest. You never
They
know.
might. I would also encourage young lawyers to connect with me and with Ascent online, primarily through LinkedIn,
Mhm.
um, and engage me. Uh, I welcome that.
Yeah.
And so when we've talked about, find these informal mentors, that I would love to be. So,
Mm.
engage with my content, ask me questions, find my phone number. All of that is not only permitted, it is encouraged. I welcome that kind of interaction because that is my community, and I am planting seeds, and I hope that they are planting seeds as well.
So, what if an articling student or a first year associate realizes they're not in the right firm or practice area? And they're looking across at labor and employment. Maybe they're taking an interest. They feel they don't know enough. They're engaging with you. They're listening. They're watching. They're learning. Maybe it's not labor and employment law. Maybe it's something else. But what would a student do if they realize, oh my gosh, I'm either in the wrong firm, the values are not aligned, or they're in a firm that practices solely in an area that's not of interest to them? What would be your recommendation? What would be your advice?
Yeah, so the first one is easy. So if you're in a firm that doesn't align with your values, realize that that's okay. Okay, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but I do encourage you to find your tribe, right? Find people that speak your language, that that um, that respond to your needs and that align with the kind of clients that you're looking to build. That doesn't need to happen like tomorrow. You don't need to burn the boats and say I'm out of here. Like as somebody who consults with people that are going through workplace disruption and workplace conflict, it's easier to find work when you are working. It's easier to find work when you have support and a supportive voice within your current company. So if this is something that you've been sitting with for a while, I and you're comfortable doing so, okay, I think it is a fair and honest conversation to go to your principal or to go to whoever you look to as a mentor within the firm and be honest with them and say, I don't feel I'm in the right place. I think that I need to move on somewhere else. And it would mean a tremendous amount for me if you could support me in this decision and help me move on to my next step. If you have those internal advocates, I know we've done this within Ascent Employment Law, right? Where it's just a round peg in a square hole and everybody can feel it and everybody knows it. And it's just a matter of approaching that conversation with respect and dignity and integrity and saying, how can we assist each other? So think about that. Now, if you think you might be in the wrong practice area, here's my piece of advice, and this may not actually align with what you're thinking. Um, Make sure you've given it an honest try, right? Because we've talked about the discomfort of being somewhere new. And I just don't want people to give up too quick, right? We're flexing muscles, we're building capacity, and that takes time. You're gonna have butterflies on that phone call for a long time. I know you're gonna experience that, but it's going to get better, right? You're gonna feel like you're a minnow amongst whales for a long time, but it gets better. And I would say just make sure you're being honest with yourself and you're putting in your reps. Now, if it's abundantly clear that you are a fish out of water, like I know it, like I don't think I could do like family law or estate law or something like that, right? And I would start by having an honest conversation. What do you like? What fills your cup? And what practice area do you think can align with that? And what firm do you think can align with that? I like employment law because it's human. Um, I get to talk to people on their level, and whether it's an individual or within a business, I get to understand their concerns. And employment law, let's face it, like I got the best gossip. Like you get the craziest stuff happening in employment law. It's never dull. It's fun. It's exciting, and you're
So many
working
stories.
wonky, bizarre
Yeah.
situations, right?
Yeah.
That you can only really find here. And so I've found my home, and I was fortunate to have found that very quickly. Um, but there's other opportunities too that could explore. I would start with that. So if there's no value alignment, move. You got to move. But if you're questioning the practice area, um, make sure you've given it an honest go, and then be intentional in what's going to happen next. Don't leave it to chance. Your career is too important.
I agree with that. And I think if you feel like you're in the wrong practice area, talk to your principal, find mentors, do some deep check-ins on the discomfort you're feeling. Because as you say, David, they might simply be butterflies. And they can guide you and express back to you whether or not they think you're suitable for your area of law or not, or give a different perspective. But I think, check in with people.
I would say as well, a lot of people, start in general practice firms, right? So if you're in for example, like a general practice litigation firm, and maybe you've been partnered up in the family law partner, but if that's not filling your cup, ask if you can experiment with other files. Can you support somebody else? Can you second somebody on this discovery, or can you second somebody in this mediation, or can you second somebody on this trial, so that you start to get different exposure. I did that over the years. I did a little bit of family law. It didn't work. I tried immigration law for years until I was honest with myself and said, like, this isn't working, right? But certainly, like, if you're in a firm that can allow for that diversity of experience, make use of it. Try it.
I think that's great advice. I think to stick with it, to figure out what works for you, where you're aligned. I think alignment is so very important. If you're aligned with what you should be doing and you're in the right practice area, you're going to attract the right kinds of clients. It's going to be more joyful. It's going to be more interesting. It's not going to feel drudgery every day. It's just going to be more fun,
I
right?
can say as well, when I've kind of looked back over my career progression, every major change, ultimately, my instinct was proven correct at every step. Every change that I took me a step closer to where I was like meant to be, until I was in a spot where I created where I was meant to be. I created my own law firm, right, with my partners. But I don't regret any step in that evolution. They all served a very important purpose. Even the ones that ended badly, looking back with hindsight, they built skills that I absolutely needed. My first firm it was very entrepreneurial. It forced me to build my own practice as a very young lawyer. My second firm was much more corporate. My third firm was I was called on to basically open up their local office. And so again, now I'm managing a team, you know, and I'm building out a team and building out a practice area. And every step in that evolution uh, created the skills and character that I now have.
And it's so easy to look back, having that experience to look back, and I'll talk about setbacks because I did a podcast recently on setbacks are actually going to serve you well in the future. But of course, when you're in that setback and you work with clients perhaps every day, David, about, you know, somebody who's lost a job or somebody who hired and invested in an employee and they have to part ways, it may not feel good at the time. Of course it doesn't. But on reflection, once you have some distance from that, that setback is actually what propelled you forward. It's actually what helps you redirect your path and get back on the right path for yourself.
Mm,
I want to go back, and you were talking about if you're in a firm where you don't have alignment, and you were talking about let them know, be honest, let them know that you don't feel like you're the right fit and that you should probably move on. I just want to caution that you have to be really careful that you're in the right firm where you can make that statement,
that's fair. Yeah. Maybe I,
because
yeah,
you're speaking as a person with strong values who's going to do right by humans around you, etc. And every firm intends to do well by everybody. I like to think, but different firms have different tolerances for these kinds of conversations. And so I just want to put a cautionary flag around that to say, be very mindful of the kind of firm you're at, because you can still look for work. You can still do your external networking and make those calls and link in with people, et cetera, and pursue a redirection and a change while employed, while doing good work. That's the other really important point. Even if you're planning your exit, it is so very important to continue doing your best work at your firm, because that is an indication of your character. It's an indication of your professionalism. Even if you're no longer going to stay at that firm or in that practice area, your work still has to stand for itself. So plan a gentle, proper exit when the time is right, when the time comes.
I think that's really smart. Thank you for flagging that. My comment, if I can kind of frame it a bit better, it's finding those mentors, those cheerleaders that will support you in the transition. And that doesn't necessarily need to be within your firm as well, right? So
Mhm.
when like there's lots of either formal mentorship or informal mentorship programs, but if you've planted seeds in your community with other lawyers, even if they're outside your firm, then they can also be your advocates. They can open doors for you. And that's really what I was trying to get at, is talking about like finding people who can help open doors. You're
Yes.
absolutely right that if you're not in a safe environment within your firm where you can have that conversation, or where, you know, the person that, you know, you're identifying is not going to be willing or able to help you open those doors, then yeah, don't do that. But my point here is that you should have people that can be enablers, and can help you find that path.
Absolutely. And it's another reason to network. Find your people. You
Mm,
called it your tribe. I love that so much. And I have seen in practice time and again how other lawyers have helped juniors or others or their contemporaries find work, because they have their ear to the ground. They have their own network of people that they're in touch with in other firms and other opportunities. And there's kind of the whisper campaign for people, the underground whisper campaign, you know, and they know they can advocate for somebody because they've seen their character, they've seen their good work, they've seen them be resilient in challenging situations. And so it's very easy to back someone who's planning their exit but still doing the work. So I think that's really important, an important point to share. Um, any final thoughts on what a student should be mindful of coming into a firm, thinking about your own experience, David, students that you might have had at your firm? Any final thoughts on advice you'd give?
yeah. Um, so I've got this with young lawyers, with young students, well, not students, but young lawyers. I've got this phrase that I sometimes use, called house cats and alley cats. House cats like to be fed. Alley cats go hunting, right? And I think you should have a bit of both. So what I mean by that is that if you're a house cat, you should be treating the partner that's feeding you work like they are your single best client. Like they are your most important client, within reasonable norms and expectations, right? And so what that means is being the source of the communication that you need to excel in the work that's being assigned to you. When is my deadline? What are your expectations on this? Can I provide you something in advance, or do you want me to make a draft of this? Being forward in that, right? Basically taking the view that I want to make that person shine in the client relationship and make their job easier. If you're accomplishing that, then they're going to keep feeding you work. There's going to be more, and you're going to be quite quickly proving yourself to be indispensable in that relationship. The second thing that I would flag is that you should have an alley cat streak to you. And this is the business development and the networking and the going out and creating for yourself. This can be an exhausting process because you will literally feel like you are putting hours and months and years into this, and it's not bearing any fruit. But you're just sprinkling seeds, and they're gonna start blooming. They will show up. And I tell you, when you recruit your first client and you go into that partner that's been your biggest cheerleader and say, look what I just did, that resonates. They will be grinning from ear to ear, and they will be celebrating in your success.
I hope
So,
so. I
so
sure
just
hope
be
so.
mindful of, I would say be mindful of that. Like, um, as a very young lawyer, you're going to be fed work. That's normal. And so be a, be a good house cat, right? That
Be a
sounds
good
so
house.
pejorative. It sounds terrible. But then also, don't be afraid to go hunting. I got to say that. I mean, I know as a law firm and a law firm owner, I look at people who are putting in the reps and trying, and I I see so much potential in those people.
And take chances, take risks,
Yes.
make smart mistakes if there is such a thing. Careful, like push the edges, take initiative, make it easier for your supervising lawyer. All of those things, just lean in and have some faith. And the idea of kind of talking and networking into that echo chamber and not getting feedback in your seed. You think your seeds are just sitting there dormant and nothing's sprouted yet. I 100% agree. I've seen it time and again for my own practice and for the clients that I work with. It will absolutely result in productive relationships.
The truth of it is, and almost without exception, the lawyers that have the most value and earn the highest incomes are going to be the rainmakers, the ones that bring in work. And you don't become a rainmaker by accident. It takes a lot of time and a lot of reps. And start now. The best time to start. Like what's that expression? Like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The
Yes.
second best
Yeah.
time is today,
Yes.
right? Well, for lawyers that are coming onto the market, your 20 years ago is right now. It's
Yes.
today. How
Yes.
fortunate are you? You are so fortunate, right? Do it because it
So
won't be easier 10 years from now.
no.
It'll be way
And
harder.
And start your digital footprint now. Get networking, get on LinkedIn,
Absolutely.
start commenting. Don't be shy. Find safe people to go and play with on LinkedIn. Comment on, if you're watching on YouTube, comment on this podcast, say something, let your name be visible. Start your digital
Mhm.
footprint now. I think that's so important. And you're good at that too, David. I just want to encourage everyone to come and follow you on LinkedIn or connect with you. I'm sure if somebody sends you a LinkedIn connection, you would probably accept them. To not feel shy about that. Introduce yourself to David by LinkedIn, and I'll put his contact information below. If you're looking at YouTube, I'll put it on in the episode notes. Your LinkedIn, your firm website, because who knows? Maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now, somebody remembers this conversation. I think, geez, they're a firm that I aspire to work with, and and they should keep in touch with you. So networking with you early might actually be a good thing too,
Hmm.
right?
Well, thank you for that. Yes.
David, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. I feel like I'm aligned with you, and I think it's just a joy to pitch and catch with you. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Susan.
Stay tuned for our Lawyer Launcher debrief. So, David Brown, wasn't he great? I was very energized by our conversation and the degree to which he shares. I mean, he's very self confident and assured now, but he's worked through a lot. He's taken a lot of initiative. He's shown a lot of courage. I was really fascinated by his career journey and where he is now, and why this has all sort of come together, but not really entirely by chance. And he had a really high degree of self-awareness as he was working through these different parts of his own career. And so I think there's just so much to take from that. And I just thought he was great. If you haven't connected with him on LinkedIn yet, I think you should. And at the very least, go and follow his LinkedIn posts, because he does continue to share a fair bit in his posts. And if ever you think you want to practice employment law and you're in the Vancouver area, if that's where their only offices 5 years from now, I think you should put a pin in Ascent Employment Law and consider them as a future employer, because I think they have a lot to offer their employees. And I just love the values that they stand for. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to make a comment, work on your own digital footprint. So thanks again.